attention, please.
Welcome back to Back in the Village, the Prisoner podcast. Assuming you have come back, as we've been gone for the past 2 weeks, which I apologize about. But to make up for it, we're back with an extra long episode. I think it's our longest one we've done so far. And we've only got a couple notes this week. I'll have some links to the Simpsons episode that we referenced, as well as the Star Trek The Next Generation episode that we referenced. So, thanks for coming back, assuming you haven't bailed on us completely. And here is the Schizoid Man. Enjoy. Good morning, good morning. Welcome back to Back in the Village, the Prisoner podcast. My name's Clay McCormick from EatDeadMeat.com. And with me again is Wes Teasdale from thePenskeFile.com. How you doing, Wes?
Good. How's it going, Clay?
Not too bad. We're, if it sounds a little different today, we're actually doing our recording on Skype because Boston has been absolutely destroyed by snow for the past week. So any mention, casual or otherwise, of snow in the weather report causes an entire city shutdown.
Yeah, we're Boston's pretty much buried deep, and parking in Boston is a pain in the ass enough when there's no snow, and when you add a couple feet of snow on top of that, it ends up being a disaster. So we are forced to do this over Skype.
Do you think I'd forgotten we used to call you Flapjack Charlie?
Yeah, I was just going to say, just to get into it, you introduced me as Wes, but I'd prefer you call me by my name, Flapjack Charlie, in all points going forward. I would greatly appreciate it.
No problem. That is a perfect name for you, I think. So yeah, obviously, or obviously not, today we're covering the Schizoid Man. And I think for this one, we should, at the front, give a brief explanation of what's going on here, because it gets a little convoluted and confusing.
Yeah, it absolutely does. I do, before you start with the plot thing, I just want to say, I think this is probably the best episode so far.
Yeah, I love this episode. I think it's a great episode.
It's, and as you're just saying, you want to give a sort of roundabout explanation of what's going on, because watching this one is exceptionally confusing. I think it all makes sense. It's just you have to sort of think about what happened after everything's all said and done. So you can give a little synopsis to start us off.
All right, so I'm going to see if I can do this, and correct me if I screw it up.
Okay.
So number 2's plan this time is he's going to attack number 6's. Number 6 is very confident in who he is. That's why in his file it's very specific and down to exactly how he likes his tea, exactly how he likes his food, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
So in an effort to undermine that, number 2 drugs number 6, puts him through brainwashing and
they call it aversion therapy, where you're exposed to things, so you eventually you get punished when you start doing things. So he's right-handed, for instance, so they shock him every time he uses his right hand to train him to use his left hand.
Mm-hmm. So they basically recondition him into an entirely different person who has
a mustache.
He has a mustache in the classic TV trope of adding a mustache to a double or facial hair to indicate that it's a double. And basically, they recondition him into another person who is then recruited to play number 6. And so, this is already getting confusing.
Yeah, so the original number 6 is brainwashed into becoming another person that they are calling number 12. And his job as number 12 is to go into the village and figure out number 6, who they are telling him that he is no longer number 6, he is number 12, which, in a clever plan words, 12 is 6 doubled. So he has to go in and break 6, which he thinks is himself, and the episode sort of revolves around him sort of having to figure out whether or not this is reality to him as he knows it.
Right, and in a clever play on that whole setup, the number 6 that our number 6 is sent in to break is playing back against him as the real number 6.
Right.
So,
yes, and
this is going to be hard to talk about.
Yeah, it's confusing, especially since they doubled. So we'll call him. Yeah,
well, we should actually. Well, we learn his name. So his name's Curtis.
Oh, that's right. We do learn.
So
his name.
the fake number 6 is named Curtis.
Yep.
So basically, number 6
Curtis
is trying to convince Curtis that Curtis is not number 6.
Yes.
But the flip is that number 6 is not completely convinced that he's number 12. He doesn't know what's going on. It's still kind of weird. So Curtis is trying to convince 6 that he's actually 12.
Yes, Curtis is the real number 12.
Good luck following this.
Curtis is the real number 12, who number 6 is being told that he is.
Right.
So they're flipping number 6 to try to crack his original self, which is this guy named Curtis, who is actually the agent of the village, trying to confuse him into giving up his
Flapjack Charlie.
Yeah, Flapjack Charlie, his nom name.
Flapjack Charlie.
Yeah.
Into convincing the original number 6 that he is losing his mind essentially, and he needs to reveal his secrets.
Right.
And it's I think it's clever. It's the first script I felt that really brought out the identity thing to a real point, which is what the show has been pushing.
Right.
If I'd put I saw 2 themes in the show. One is the obvious one, that's the identity theme, like what makes you yourself. And there's another sort of subtle theme that I don't really care for because I think it's wrong. It's science versus the human instinct. And he even says that at one point in the episode. But so going along with the idea that the identity is what you are defined by and they can't break you and you are an individual and all that. There's this weird sort of undercurrent of science is wrong and whatever a person thinks is right, which is kind of a strange take. It sort of flies in the face of, especially since people are talking about like vaccines and everything nowadays. It's kind of a difficult argument to sort of take seriously, but I do think it's interesting that the show tried anyway.
Well, actually, one of the things that I find interesting about this episode, which gets into the next thing I wanted to talk about, is so this show is for better. Well, I don't want to say for better or worse, but it's everything that happens in the show is more or less rooted in science. No matter, despite how fictional the science might be.
Yeah.
But one of the linchpins of this particular story lands on basically a mutant who is practicing telepathy. I guess that's probably why she's in the village.
Yes.
Because she seems to be just a charming young lady.
Yes.
And doesn't seem to be much of a spy, but apparently she has telepathy.
Yeah, which it takes a long time for the show. I was really confused. It's such a weird. It's the most the Mission Log podcast that I listen to for Star Trek. They have this thing where they say this episode is more sci than fi, or this episode is more fi than sci.
Yep.
And all that means is like science fiction. Some people prefer science fiction where it's more science based. Some prefer it where it's more sort of fantasy fiction based. And it took a long time in the beginning of this show for me to really even understand if this woman was actually telepathic or if they were doing some kind of arrangement.
Yeah, the way it plays out, they don't really give you any indication that she's not telepathic, or at least telepathic to the level of being able to read cards. Which those cards you may remember from the opening scene of Ghostbusters.
Yes, I think I've seen them in a couple, but that's definitely it. I was having a hard time. They're called Zener cards, I think.
Right,
and it's,
yeah.
They're in Ghostbusters. I think they might be in a couple other things too, but they're such an iconic little callback.
Yeah, I'm sure they pop up in everything. They seem to be something that was sort of a big deal in the early 30s in terms of proving the existence of clairvoyance and extrasensory perception, but I think a lot of it got debunked shortly afterwards, as those things do.
Yeah.
17 out of 25 is quite remarkable. couldn't it just mean that we're simpatico?
It might, but there's more to it than that. Out of the last 4 runs, you've got 73 out of 100. You're gifted.
But yeah, there's a few things really interesting about her. One of which is, that seems to be, if not legit telepathic, but if not legit telepathic, good enough to do like a sideshow trick.
Yes, and she's also sort of only telepathic with him,
right?
And in some extent,
right? Which I guess would make you think that her whole thing is a setup, because they bring her the linchpin that I mentioned earlier is they bring her in later, or I should say, Six brings her in to prove that he is the real number 6.
Yep.
Through showing this rapport that they have with her guessing the cards that he's looking at.
Yep. And
he fails where Curtis, or the real number 12, succeeds. And as I was watching it this time, I was trying to figure out, was she in on it the whole time, or was she just brought in at the end? And I think she's not in on it the whole time, because they bring her out, or she, to cap off the summary, Six figures out he's the real number 6 by seeing a picture that this girl took where he has a bruise on his finger. Yep. And he then looks at his own finger and sees the bruise and realizes that he's the real number 6.
Yes.
And he then goes after, attacks Curtis, gets all the info he needs out of Curtis. Rover comes along and mistakes the two of them and kills Curtis. And Six then uses this new identity to get out of the village. And
for 20 seconds.
Yeah, for 20 seconds, yeah. Or I should say attempt to leave the village.
Yep.
And in the process of leaving, he meets up with the girl whose name is number 24, but she's actually given a name. Her name is Allison, which is another thing I want to talk about.
They call her Allison in the show?
Yes, yeah.
Oh, okay. I couldn't even... I think I remember. They're all multiples of 6, which is...
Right.
I assume this has a point. But yeah, she's number 24.
That seems to be a recurring thing. Every now and then, a lot of the characters end up being multiples of 6.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, they have a moment at the end when he's getting ready to leave on the helicopter, where she approaches him, acting as though he is Curtis, but knowing that he is really number 6.
Yep.
And says something to the effect of, I'm sorry, it was a betrayal. I didn't want to do it. I wouldn't do it again.
Yeah.
So I can only assume that she was not in on it the entire time. She was just forced into it later. I guess? What do you think?
I think she is... the issue with this whole thing, before I answer that question, is that it can. A lot of these shows are continuing number 6's sort of. I can't tell if he's trusting people. I think he trusts her at the beginning, although it's hard to tell. He does this thing. He gets a little bit snappy with her when she's doing the cards. He does this thing where he yells at people, which is either because he's a huge misogynist or is because he doesn't trust the people that he sort of encounters in the village. Mm-hmm. And I got the sense watching this that I get the sense that she's the same as the lady scientist in the ABC episode, where she is in on the con with number 2, but she sort of relates to, or like has a little crush or something. Not even that far, but she has some kind of feelings for number 6 that makes it difficult when the plans actually work for them to reconcile what they're doing. Which is interesting because she's... I have to assume she's in on it, because I think the whole thing where Curtis gets the 5 in a row, guessing the Xener cards, right?
Right, yep.
If what she's saying is true about her telepathy, that she can only really do it with him, then it has to be a con, because Curtis is not number 6.
Right.
If it is true, her telepathy is more powerful than anyone had previously considered, and she can read anybody's mind, which seems less likely the way that the story went. So I'd have to assume that she is in on this, at least at the point where Curtis is guessing the cards.
Oh,
correctly.
that part, definitely.
Okay.
I definitely think she's in on that part. But I guess my question is whether or not, it's a long game. Because when we open the episode, the two of them are practicing this mind reading technique. And 24 and 6 are practicing this mind reading technique. And they are both very comfortable with each other. To the point where knowing how 6 is specifically with everybody in the village, but specifically women, he's clearly come around to this person and been around her long enough that he is at least comfortable, if not, I wouldn't know if I'd say if he goes so far as he trusts her.
Right.
But he's definitely friendly and comfortable with her presence.
Yeah, more
so.
Yeah.
So I guess I don't know if it's a long con where they have her get in with him, get in on his good side just to pull this off later, or if it's legit, they do have a legit, relationship, platonic relationship.
Sure.
Which then, when this thing goes in, number 2 probably strong arms her into helping them pull off the con once he calls her up.
Yep.
Knowing that, or I should say, number 2 assuming that 6 will go for this girl as a way to prove that he is really number 6.
Yes.
And he's just one step ahead of 6.
Yeah, I'd just sticking with the way that the show works, I'd have to assume that she's kind of in on this. I wonder if it's a sort of flaw of the acting or script at some point, because I think it only makes sense, especially with everything that he's been exposed to previously. Like, I don't understand him really trusting anybody at this point. So in my mind, it would make more sense if she is in on this and it's a very long con, and by the end of it, just feels regret towards what she's done.
Yeah, no, I could buy that. Either way, I think. I think in the long run, that answer probably doesn't matter. But
right.
it's just really interesting given his previous relationships with women on the show.
Yes,
which is also interesting because his relationship with her is definitely the closest he's gotten to anybody else in the village.
Yes. Yep.
Especially, like I said before, especially female, because he seems to have an aversion to them.
He does, yeah.
I'm ashamed of what I did to number 6 yesterday.
Why are you telling me?
Everyone has to tell someone.
It was your job.
It was a betrayal.
Isn't everything we do here a betrayal?
It's not often one gets a second chance.
There are no second chances.
Does he know her name is Allison at some point?
Yes, he does. Yeah, because when he calls her up from 2's office, he says, number 24, and he says, "Hello, Allison. Would you mind coming down?"
Oh.
And I think 2 refers to her as Allison as well. There's a lot of names in this episode, actually.
Yeah, Curtis and Allison.
Yeah, Curtis and Allison, and his wife's name is Suzanne or something.
Yeah,
12.
Yeah, Susan, something like Suzanne or Susan.
Susan,
like that.
yeah. And Flapjack Charlie.
Flapjack Charlie.
Yeah.
And speaking of names, I may as well say this now instead of waiting till the trivia. Mm-hmm. This is the only episode in which Rover is referred to as Rover.
Yes, I remember that, and I can't remember. I had thought that was just a behind-the-scenes show thing, but yeah, they do call the little bouncy ball Rover in this one, which is interesting.
It's uncanny. Number 12 has caught the man's whole style.
In Haiti, would say he has stolen his soul.
The other thing that I wanted to point out that is a first for this episode is we get not one, but 2 non-Caucasian village members.
Yes, I noticed that immediately.
Which
I'm almost as big a racist as number 6. Yeah, because they've got the...
Well, at least they weren't Estonians.
No, they absolutely were not. One was a black guy is working in the command center with number 2. Mm-hmm. And who's the second person?
When number 6 wakes up as number 12 the first day, when he comes out, an Indian man in a turban walks by him and says, "Hello, number 12."
Yep, that's right.
And I found it, and the other thing is, when the other non-Caucasian village member, the black guy who works in the control room, he and number 2 are watching number 6, thinking that he's number 12, et cetera, and number 2 is marveling at his own work. This black control room member says, in Haiti, they would say, "You have stolen his soul."
Well, we can't accuse the British of being insensitive to the times here in Haiti. My God, that's funny you mentioned that. He says it, and his accent prevented me from understanding what he'd said. So
right,
yeah, that's very funny though. In Haiti,
right, the one black guy on the show has to be a voodoo priest or something.
Yeah, well, that ties into the whole second theme: science versus human instinct. This guy's like, he's obviously a scientist because he's working in this high-tech control room. But he's like, you know what? This is some voodoo shit going on right here. I don't want any part of this.
And maybe that's why he never comes back.
Yeah.
It's not going to work, you know. Certainly isn't. Why don't you run away and play somewhere else? I have a very strong sense of identity. Oh, yes, of course. Sorry, I was forgetting. You're supposed to be me. You are the goody, number 6, and I am the baddie who is supposed to be proving you wrong. Is that it? That's right, except there's no supposed about it.
So... let's get into. We talked about the plan and we tried to work it out, but let's get into a little bit more in depth. Why do you think this is the approach that number 2 went with this week?
This show is the culmination of identity, which the village has been pushing hard. Every intro has him screaming, "I'm not a number. I'm a person," or "I'm a man," whatever he says. And this is the logical endpoint of that idea, where you are breaking someone down to the point where they don't really know if they are who they think they are.
Right.
And it's kind of an interesting idea that it's just like, identity is really sort of formed by how other people perceive you.
Yes.
You can think as much about what you want. However you perceive yourself is probably always wrong as to how other people perceive you. And all that really matters is how they react to you, and their reaction defines what you are. His plan, number 2's plan at this point, I actually thought number 2's plan here is really strong. We'll get into our ranking later on, I assume. But his plan is to create as much confusion as possible, and then hope that some truth comes out of it, which I think is a really good idea. And
yes.
I'm pleased by the performance of this number 2 as well.
Right. He's very preppy.
He is. He's super preppy, but he's also calm.
Right.
And I prefer the calm number 2s. Just because he has the most control over the situation, I think, that any of his predecessors have had. Outside of maybe the Chimes to Big Ben one, which is a big scam the whole time. But this number 2 definitely has control of his situation and is acting accordingly.
Right. And we also actually get a good look at who knows what. Whereas, as we were talking about with Chimes to Big Ben, one of the issues is how they skirt the line. This is just on like a television show level, how they skirt the line about who knows what when in terms of number 2's plan rolling out.
Yeah,
because there's a lot of times where you could question whether or not they are showing us number 2 being acting oblivious to the plan he has coming up and just reacting to what 6 is doing.
Yeah.
Whereas in this episode, you're never unsure except for the end, but you're never unsure where number 2 stands as far as his plan and whether it's working. They actually go. I feel like they actually go out of their way in this episode to cut back to number 2 and have him comment on his plan.
Yeah,
because when number 12 and number 6 get into their who's the real number 6 battle of wits, or I should say battle of Olympic-style fencing, because apparently we also learn about 6 in this episode that he's a crack marksman,
yep,
an Olympic fencer, and an Olympic boxer.
Yes, and Olympic, but we don't learn if he's Southpaw or Orthodox as he gets his ass handed to him. I love those scenes; they're just so funny.
Yeah,
McGoohan acting in like a action scene is very, very funny to me for whatever reason. He's very jerky with everything he does.
Yeah, and I mean they do that stuff really well in this episode. With I believe the person playing opposite him is his stunt double.
Yeah,
and I think they do really well as far as the back and forths go. And it was nice that they had one of the things they do involve fencing, so he has to wear a mask.
Yep.
So you can do them in a 2-shot, not have to just do a back and forth of it looking like he's fencing into the camera kind of thing.
Yeah, I was surprised by how much of his face actually showed through the mask.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. It would seem like it would be more of a shooting nightmare than necessary, since you could just shoot it and then dub the lines over if there was any kind of problem.
It's good agricultural stuff, but hardly have got to my place on the Olympic team. No swordsman, no shot either. If ever you do challenge me to a duel, your safest bet will be battle axes in a very dark cellar.
So they even go to the point, number 2 even, or I should say the show even goes to the point of during that fencing scene, 6 and 12 have a verbal back and forth quoting Hamlet.
Oh, really?
And I think it's Hamlet.
Yeah.
And they cut back to number 2 who's watching this, and he goes, our boy has done his homework. The Hamlet bit was a nice touch. So number 2 never loses track of what's going on in his own plan.
Yes. Which as I was watching this, I was wondering, I think we've talked about this before, where TV shows from this era were very much the hero has to be heroic. He can only take actions that are heroic in nature. He's not allowed to make these weird decisions or do things that are sort of underhanded in order to get ahead. And I was wondering through this episode if they could have even taken this identity thing to a much bigger scale, because as you're saying, we're never in doubt as to which number 6 is the real number 6.
Yeah.
And I felt like there was a whole lot of stuff that they could have done here where to even confuse the audience a little bit more, and have it, I don't know if it would be the example, but to like even flip it at the end and have him not be, the character that we've been following the whole time, not be the real number 6. And
you get yourself into a Spider-Man situation.
Exactly. Yeah. It all gets tangled in a web. But there's also, for the amount of times that number 2 is clarifying the situation, where he's like, this number 6 is going to break, and the excellent job by the black-shirted or the white-shirted number 6. And I felt like they could have been more clear with him figuring out the plan. Because I had to think about this long, and I didn't really understand. As you said, it's his bruised finger.
Yep.
And he also notices the on his nightstand.
Yes. Well, let's get into the end, because I have a lot of things I want to say about the end.
Okay.
We can get into that a little bit later.
Sure.
But just to wrap up what we were talking about before. Yeah, I think you're right about why he goes for this approach. I feel like this is the next logical step in terms of what the village can attack to break 6. Because they've tried to attack his mind, they've tried to attack his will, they've tried to attack his what am I looking for? They tried to attack his sense of self-importance, and and through all of that, the only thing that he has to hang on to is his sense of self. And to attack that directly makes perfect sense. And they definitely chose a very interesting way to do it.
I am number 6. I am number 6. Number 6! 6! 6! 6! 6! Your boy is dedicated to his work.
I told you he was a tough nut, number 12.
Number 6. Number 6.
You're quite right, of course. It was careless of me. He might have had.
But yeah, so getting into what you were talking about, going to the end. He notices that he's got a bruise on his finger, and he also notices the date because I believe the implication being all of the stuff that the day that they're in currently is supposed to be just the next day from when he goes to sleep at the beginning of the episode.
Yep.
But obviously they had to recondition him, and he grew a beard and had to shave it off into a mustache. So a lot of time has passed. And I guess they just forgot to reset the calendar or something.
Well, that's what I was saying. They weren't particularly clear. There's the calendar, which does that. But it's also the bruise on his finger has moved up his finger. It's no longer at the base. So, I mean, I didn't realize that immediately. I realized it sort of after thinking about it, but they really don't draw your attention to it. The first time they show the bruised finger, it's in some horrible like freeze frame cutaway that they show, and the next
it's like one of those when they used to do the close-ups on Ren and Stimpy, where they would just whoever was doing the painting would just really go in and make everything as gross as possible.
And it's just totally frozen, and he's looking at his finger in the shot, but the freeze frame for a couple seconds is just there. So he knows that time has passed. And is that when he sort of remembers being?
Yes, I think that's the trigger that gets him to, because he's on the. They even go to the point of removing his mole. Which is. They go through a pretty good set of mind screwery on 6 in this episode.
Yeah.
They, at first he.
I don't smoke. Flapjacks are my favorite food.
Yeah, well, I like how even at the beginning, when he wakes up as 12, he believes it just about as much as the people watching the show would.
Yeah.
When he comes in and they do the whole flapjack thing, and then 6 is like, you really expect to believe that me growing a mustache overnight is going to convince me I'm another person?
Yeah.
Only he says it a lot louder and shorter than that.
Physical advantage of growing a mustache overnight.
And so on top of that, they've reconditioned him to be a left-handed. They've made sure that he only smokes black Russian cigarettes, which I didn't even realize there was a difference between white and black cigarettes. I don't know what the difference is.
There's a lot of this is pre the 80s anti-smoking thing. These guys just know a lot about smoking, and they're smoking some intense cigars because he's coughing up a lung.
Well, you know what I actually noticed last night, which I don't know if you've ever seen anyone do this or you do this. When he lights the match, he strikes with the box, not with the match, which I've never seen anybody do ever.
I definitely don't do that, but yeah, maybe that's a British thing or something. I have no idea. I'm trying to think now if it makes more sense to do it that way. No,
probably no.
No, I wouldn't think so. Interesting choice by McGoohan right there.
Yeah, and
is McGoohan actually right or left-handed? Do we know?
I honestly have no idea.
Yeah, I haven't been paying attention. I was wondering if he.
If I had to guess, I'd say right-handed, but I'm only saying that because 6 is right-handed.
Yes, and he's when he resets himself, he starts flipping the box, and he's catching it with his right hand. So,
do you still insist you're number 6? Yes. Your mind can lie, but your body can't. You'll see.
The way that they go about tricking him is, I feel like you really have to pay attention to get everything that they're doing. Because the one scene that really kind of confused me this time was the fingerprint scene. Because 6's sense of self is so solid, he even knows what his fingerprint looks like.
Yeah, through no analysis, he can just look at a picture of it and go, "Oh yeah, that's me.
Oh yeah, that's mine. That's my right thumbprint. Of course it is."
Yeah, that was a weird scene. And also the way that they, I think it wasn't really shot very clearly. Did number 2 put his thumbprint on there at one point?
Yeah. So what happens is they bring up 6's thumbprint, the real number 6's thumbprint. Or wait, no, they bring up our number 6's thumbprint.
Yes.
Right. And our number 6 says, "Oh, yes, that's my thumbprint." And number 2's like, "Yeah, there you go. Keep up the charade. Good boy."
Yep.
And number 2 then shows off this fingerprint machine where he puts his own thumbprint down. Tooth puts his thumbprint down. And it shows up on the screen as clearly not being a match. And so Curtis, number 6, says, "Oh, all right, fine. I'll put my thumb down, and then we will see, finally, that I am the real number 6.
Yeah.
He puts his thumbprint down, and it comes up different. But then they cut over to number 2, who's looking at a screen with our number 6, where those prints match.
Right.
So still, this part of the game is number 2 and our number 6 pulling one over on the Curtis number 6, when actually number 2 and Curtis number 6 are pulling one over on our number 6.
Yeah.
So like it took a few. I had to I rewound it and watched it a couple times just to make sure I knew what was going on, because it's very quick. Like when they cut over to number 2 and our number 6, and they show that the prints are actually a match, even though on the big screen they're a mismatch.
Yep.
It's a very quick shot.
Okay.
And it's easy to miss, and that scene can be a little. That's another example of this show not really giving you a ton of exposition in what they're doing.
Yeah.
But you have to really pay attention and put together what's going on.
Yeah, it's very cinematic, except for the fact that they are limited to, being a TV show. So the cuts they do can't have that sort of lingering where you can look at it and be like, "Oh, what's going on?" They cut so quickly all the time. I'm assuming because they have to get this thing in under, the time limit that they're allotted to. And they rely a lot on the film tendency of just using visuals, except in a TV show, you kind of need to explain. Some character has to come in and tell the audience what's going on.
Generally, yes.
Just out of a consideration of time limits.
Mm-hmm. And what's actually also really interesting about this is, you and I are watching this on like 50-inch television screens.
Yeah.
Where you can see every detail. And everything seems much bigger. But you have to imagine an episode like this that's as pretty dense plot-wise as it is on a TV in 1967. I mean, there's a good chance it probably wasn't even in color a lot of places,
Yeah, yep.
And I can't imagine what something like this must have been like to watch. Because, I mean, you get into stuff like, Star Trek and The Twilight Zone. I feel like there's not a ton of gray area in terms of how things play out. To be fair, it's been a long time since I've watched the original Star Trek series. So maybe it's, denser and more thought-provoking than I remember it being.
Yeah.
But a lot of the stuff that they do there is pretty much, they give it to you, you see what's going on, they wrap it up.
Yes.
So
Star Trek is much more unilateral in its perception of things. Someone's always right, or there's always a sort of like clear moral center, which there seems to be in this show as well. But they also they try to confuse you about what they're actually trying to get to. And, in the case of here, it's identity, so it's like confusing the identity. A Star Trek thing about confusing identity would rely much more on
goatees.
Yeah, goatees, and sort of like you're always aware. There would be no prisoner confusion. Kirk would not be confused about what's going on. He would be 100% like, fuck you, like, this is wrong, I'm real. And in The Prisoner, he goes the other way because he is actually broken for a little bit. Because they have that scene where he's freaking out in bed, where 6 is probably the least restful sleeper in television history, because he's always flailing around when he's sleeping.
Unless he's dreaming about the moment that he resigned over and over and over again.
And then he's very calm. Yeah, it's just the show is nuanced in that kind of a way.
Schizoid man. Schizoid man. Schizoid man. Schizoid man.
that's one of the things you're talking about Star Trek and Kirk always knowing what's going on. That's one of the things that I found really impressive about this episode, because it's been a long time since I've seen that Mirror Universe episode of Star Trek.
Yep.
But I can only assume it goes along the same lines as most of these things tend to do, where, as you're saying, as far as the main characters go, there's never really a confusion over who is who until you get that scene where it's like, no, I'm really Spock.
Right.
This,
yeah.
that kind of, when there's a third person who is the person who's not sure.
Right. Pointing a gun at them always.
Right.
Yeah.
And in this episode, they do that scene, but Rover is the person.
Right, yeah.
And he ends up choosing correctly, but not because he wants to.
Right. In a confusing, it's shot another little bit of a confusing scene because Curtis, I guess, is yelling out the safe word, which is not clear at all until the end when the real number 6 uses that safe word, which is the Schizoid man.
Right.
And
the reason that okay, finish your thought.
It's just it's not clear in the. I didn't really understand what was going on when you have the shots of Rover in the the foreground, and he's looking at both of the number 6s, and they're both yelling Schizoid man at him. Yeah. And I guess that's the code word to not have Rover attack that person.
Well, at the beginning of the episode when 6 first wakes up as number 12 and is given his quote-unquote mission briefing. Yep. Number 2 tells him that the password is Gemini.
Yeah. Which he pronounces Gemini, right? Is that...
Gemini.
Okay, yeah.
It's like aluminium, I guess.
Yeah. Well, number 2 says it correctly. It's just McGoohan's character. I thought he was poking fun at the thugs who attacked him by mispronouncing the safe word or something. Maybe not.
Well, see, when you get into that point, that again gets into the ending where I have some issues with the way this all wraps up. But basically, the password thing, he gives him the Gemini password.
Yep.
So they will, if he uses that password, then they know which number 6 they're dealing with.
And Gemini is a great password for this episode. It's like it's the perfect password.
It really is. Well, I'm going to have to pull it up. The definition of schizoid. So right here it says, per the title, the schizoid personality disorder is a personality disorder characterized by a lack of interest in social relationships, a tendency towards a solitary lifestyle, secretiveness, and emotional coldness.
Yep.
So that is a very fitting word to use for 6 as well.
Well, it's kind of the... I think popular culture misinterprets it, but when a schizo is seen as multiple personality disorder, right? I don't think that's what it is, but I think that's generally how people think of schizophrenia. I don't think that's the actual medical. I think what you described is more accurate, but that's how I think of it. When someone says they're schizoid, it basically means they have multiple personalities.
Right.
The password! I don't know what you're talking about. What is it? What password? What is it? Oh, schizoid. Schizoid man. Schizoid man.
So Curtis has the password schizoid man, and 6 beats it out of him, and then maybe that was the wrong phrase to use, but and then when they both leave and Rover is at the door, our number 6 says the password first. So when Curtis comes out and he starts yelling the password, I guess Rover, because I assume Rover has some sort of sentient intelligence to make this decision.
Yeah.
Well, Rover assumes that Curtis is just saying the same thing that 6 said, so he assumes Curtis is the
doppelganger.
Yes,
yeah.
Or he assumes Curtis is the real number 6, and then he just kills him, which is weird.
Yes. Well, actually, now that you're saying this, I'm trying to run this through my head. Would it be if Rover thinks that must be the case? Yeah. So why would he kill? That is an odd choice. Why he would kill the number 6?
Well, I think it's an odd choice, but it's a necessary choice because at this point in the episode, you have to get rid of him somehow.
Yeah.
And the reaction when 6 calls number 2 and says, pretending to be Curtis, and he says that Rover has killed number 6. Number 2's like, what? What do you mean he killed him?
Oh, right.
So
yeah.
it's like Rover seems to be some sort of sentient thing that they don't completely have under control.
Yeah, yeah.
Or like
I think you could,
this is the
you could argue that both ways, because you could say that Rover could be a computer program that doesn't understand subtlety.
Okay.
That could be an argument, or you could say it's a sentient creature that's making a choice. I'm inclined to think he's just a sort of shitty computer program that is like, it has like if you throw a monkey wrench in, it won't know what to do.
Right. Right.
Because either they haven't really shown it to be anything other than something that responds to orders when it's sent out.
This is definitely the most quote-unquote free will that Rover has had thus far in the show.
Yeah, and it's also the most shots of him sort of patrolling. Like, he just sort of is walking around the streets at night. You know,
Yeah.
They walk by number 6 a couple times.
Well, maybe, I guess it's because of that Haitian voodoo priest was controlling him in this episode. So
That's right. He's got a little voodoo doll. It's like a stress ball, and he's stabbing pins into it.
But yeah, so just to finish the thought about the concept, this concept is generally a lot more cut and dry, and I think they do a really good job of inverting the doppelganger idea, because they do make it more complex, and by the end of the episode, or at least by the point where 6 is starting to break, you as an audience member have to be confused as well.
Yes.
I mean, like I said, they give you pieces along the way, checking in with number 2, making sure that you know where everything is in the plan. But even knowing that, I was still like kind of not exactly sure who knew what, and how much time was passed. They did a good job of inverting the idea of the doppelganger thing to put all of the focus on the chaos, like you were saying.
Right. No, yeah, I agree with that. It's it's well written in that regard, that everything really comes to a head, and it's a nice touch. They definitely didn't keep it as cut and dry, excuse me, as they could have.
Recriminations aren't going to help. It's a disgrace for us both. When do I leave?
Half an hour.
Let's get into the way it wraps up, because I have very few problems with the episode up until this point.
After this whole breakdown, I had we're now obviously picking it apart. There are a lot more issues. I think it's kind of like Inception again. Just to like once you start thinking about it, it starts to sort of fall apart at the edges. I think you have to judge it on the strength of as you're watching it. As I'm watching it, I'm not particularly noticing these things.
Yes.
And once you start picking apart things, it kind of becomes interesting. So what did you think of the ending?
Well, I don't love the way it wraps up. I do like it.
From what point?
From the point where 6 realizes that he is the real number 6. From that point on, I have some issues.
So from him electrocuting himself with the wall socket? Okay.
That is issue number 1, is that somehow, again, in the grand tradition of television and cartoons, the way to knock somebody back into the way they were at the beginning of the episode is by electrocuting them or dropping an anvil on them or some other sharp blow to the head.
Yep.
Or as Randy Quaid says in Christmas Vacation, falls down a well, eyes go cross-eyed, gets kicked by a mule, eyes go back. I don't know.
Yeah.
So
he's been being electrocuted, so he figures that electrocuting himself will miraculously fix everything.
I guess. I don't know where the line of logic there is.
I also didn't understand his electrocuting. What was he sticking in the wall socket that needed the lamp to be touched to cause him to be...
Well, he wasn't sticking anything in the wall socket. I believe what was happening was the lamp itself was shorting out.
Oh.
So he grabbed onto a metal pipe.
Oh, okay.
And then touched the lamp and then electrocuted himself that way. Which probably should have killed him.
the shots of him being electrocuted are fantastic. He sort of like falls and throws the lamp. It's very excellent stuff.
Much like everything else McGoohan does, it's very staccato and very short.
Yeah.
So when he electrocutes himself, it just kind of goes. Bah!
Was the lamp previously shown to be shorting? I don't remember that.
Yeah, he sits down and the lamp is kind of flickering in and out, and it's kind of making a sparking noise.
Oh, okay. All right.
But yeah, so like I understand that you have to wrap this up, and with a show like this, like we were talking about last week with Free for All, sometimes when you get to the end, you got to wrap things up because you're at minute 40 or something, or 48 or something like that, and you've got 2 or 3 minutes to really tie everything off. And I feel like it just the story doesn't fall apart, but just the ways that they get to points A, B, and C after that aren't great. For instance, last week you were talking about how you thought Free for All felt like the first part of a two-parter.
Sure.
I feel like if they were going to do a two-parter, this should have been the two-parter. Because when he figures out he's number 6, he then makes his way to, first of all, we have the obligatory number 6 tearing ass, beating some guys down scene.
Yep. My favorite. My absolute favorite.
Which is triggered by number 2 after he gets finished having a massage by the butler.
Yes, very very weird cutscene.
Who, I don't know if we've talked about him yet. I know we talked about him when we recorded the first episode, but I think I cut it out. The butler being one of the only other recurring characters on the show. Yeah. His actor named Angelo Muscat, very diminutive fellow.
Yeah, continuing the British obsession with little people. I don't understand it. They find them to be the height of...
no pun intended.
They find them to be the absolute height of ridiculousness, like in not even ridiculousness, but like they're infatuated with them. Like what's that Gervais show? Life's Too Short.
Oh yes,
it's like it's all every other show in Britain. It seems to be about to have like a little person involved. I don't understand.
Hey, well, why not? I guess.
Yeah, it's just
they have to work too.
Well, I mean, just in America, if you just have like every show must have a 6'10" guy in it. It's like why is this happening?
That's a good point. But yeah, so after he beats those guys down, he goes over to Curtis's place, and Curtis is still pretending to be number 6.
Yep.
But
he's got a squirt gun.
He's got a nerve gas gun.
Yeah, which squirts on you. He says 1 squirt, you'll be brain dead. 2 squirts, you're dead, or something like that.
Yeah, one squirt, you'll be paralyzed. Yeah. And, like, that is completely unprecedented in the show, that anybody has a gun, let alone a nerve gas weapon.
Right.
And at this point, if anything were to tip me off that this guy was working with number 2, it would probably be the fact that he has a nerve gas gun.
Yeah.
Because why would anybody else in the village have that, or why would number 6 have that? Number 6 doesn't really use weapons.
Right.
And after that point, Curtis and number 6 get into it. Oh, well, I'll get back to this. Mm-hmm. Curtis and number 6 get into a fist fight in which Curtis very quickly gives up everything.
The information, you mean?
Yeah. Yep. 6 punches him 2 or 3 times, and instantly is like, "My name is Curtis. I'm not from here. The password is Schizoid Man. Please don't hurt me." Right. And especially where at the beginning of the episode, they number 2 mentions how great of an agent number 12 is.
Yes.
It seems really like a quick turnaround that he would give everything up that quickly.
Yeah,
because
sure,
if anything, that's when you've got number 6 on the ropes if he's turning to violence.
Yeah.
So you should probably double down on it.
No, I agree. It's definitely we're at the end. We need to move the story along type thing, because he didn't even take his nerve gun and shoot him with it once or something. Be like, "I'll shoot you again unless you tell me what's going on."
I'm a very light sleeper. It's in my file. 5-yard range. Nerve gas. 1 squirt, you're paralyzed. 2 squirts, you're dead.
I like that scene just on a technical level, because I can't imagine how many takes it took. But the blocking where they didn't reveal the stunt double's or the doppelganger, who's obviously can't be McGoohan. They did the takes pretty well, where the backs of heads are very, no one's face is ever coming into clear focus, and they're moving around quite a bit. So it was impressive in that level.
Yeah, just technically, even the split screen stuff, it stands out a lot more. I'm watching it on Blu-ray.
Yep.
You can see a lot of the seams more, but even so, it's very, very subtle.
No, I think it's pretty excellent for 1960s. This is. I'm just watching it with what seems to be standard definition internet quality, and it's. I was impressed. Just the amount of pacing back and forth they do is weird. You think if you were shooting something like this, you just have the two people stand still, so you don't have to match up their reactions of looking at each other. Right. When number 6 and 12 are in the same scene, they're constantly like tigers in a cage, like pacing back and forth against each other. And it felt like it's just an excessive amount of work that you'd have to put together later on.
Well, the production of this show, if anything, is notorious for being an excessive amount of work.
Yeah.
So that doesn't surprise me at all. But yeah, just that wrap up, it's a little, I don't know, a little too quick for me, given that they've gone through so much effort to make him think that he's this other guy, and the electroshock reset seems kind of cheap.
Well, I'll tell you the fundamental problem with this resolution, right? So the episode's been arguing that he's an individual, and he is his own person. He is in control of his sort of destiny or whatever. He is a maker of his own will. He has free will, essentially. Yep. And the problem here is that he needs to... They're arguing that he is legitimately another person because they have brainwashed him to become another person. And the only way to fix himself is to physically cause something for his brain to restart itself, right? Which seems to fly in the face of you're an individual, because if you're arguing you're an individual, you can't be like, oh, but we can actually mechanically change you into a different person. That narrative doesn't make any sense. If you wanted to have him restart, he has to do it totally on his own terms. Right.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And again, obviously, I don't know if they had the time or the money to spend on another episode of basically the prisoner equivalent of that scene in Kill Bill where Uma Thurman learns how to walk again by laying in a car and saying, "Move your right toe."
Yeah.
But basically, that's what they kind of need. That's what he needed.
Just a scene where he forces himself to eat eggs and toast with tea with lemon in it instead of
Oh, speaking of that, in the scene when he's remembering all of the conditioning they put him through, the scene where they're teaching him to only like pancakes because apparently you need brainwashing and conditioning to enjoy pancakes. Is one of the things they put in front of him bacon and dog shit?
I think it was black pudding, but it's.
Is that what it was?
I think so. It's hard to tell. It looked like they had pulled out a gigantic insect out of like the Paleolithic era and fried it on the barbecue. And
because the first one was clearly eggs and bacon, which I don't know if it was like rotten or something, but he just doesn't eat it and pushes it away. But then the second one, they pulled the thing off, and it maybe it was black pudding, but it looked like it was a side of bacon and two over easy lumps of dog shit.
Well, that would explain his reaction to the whole thing. Yeah, I don't know what it was. And it's the there was something else like that too. Oh, when he breaks the cigar, I didn't understand. Did he find something? What was he doing?
Yeah, there was something. There was like a wire or something inside of it.
Yeah, I saw.
I don't know if
like a clear bit of plastic, and I didn't know if that was. If that's what I was supposed to be noticing, or if I was supposed to be noticing something else.
No, I think that's what you're supposed to be noticing. I don't know what that was.
Yep. Is that what just made him cough? Is that what?
I guess. I can only assume that was something in there reinforcing the conditioning of not liking cigars.
Okay. Yeah.
When he breaks apart the first cigarette, though, I mean, he didn't find anything in that one, so I don't know.
Okay.
You are edgy. Never known you quite so strung up.
You mean I'm not as I was?
Yeah.
And then, the very end, I did appreciate the last 3 minutes of this one.
This one, sorry, I just want to say this end is the end. The last 3 minutes I do really like.
Yep.
But the turn at the end, I have problems with. But anyway, go ahead.
The turn. You mean the turn to get to the end, or the turn at the very end? Okay.
Yes, the turn to get to the end.
I'd agree with that. But I do like I think the ending here is really strong because 6 is the one who fucks up, which is a nice change of pace.
Yep.
This number 2 is clever enough to figure it out, and it's actually nicely dramatic or sort of tense because they play that scene well. Where the audience it's really clear to the audience that number 6 has screwed up something. You don't know what it is until the very end, where they fly him up, bring him down, and then the number 2 explains to him that he made a mistake factually with this woman Susan, who is Curtis's wife, has been dead for a while, so he should know that. And I just thought it was a nice, very close. It's the closest that 6 has ever gotten to getting out,
right?
And then it all backfires.
What I really like about it is it in an episode where things are across the board kind of being turned on their head. They take the entire concept and they turn it on its head, where at the end of the episode, instead of 6 trying to find the hole in 2's plot, 2 is trying to find the hole in 6's plot.
Right.
And I also like that they kind of throw a little bit of a twist on, that scene that you're talking about with 6 and 2 on the way to the helicopter is a very standard scene for a story like this, where you have someone pretending to be somebody else, and there's usually a scene where they have to stumble to find answers to questions they don't know the answers to. But they give you a little bit of a twist on it because they tell you beforehand that this guy has a wife or a woman in his life named Susan, whereas usually it would be out of the blue. Like, for instance, in A, B, and C, when 6 is interrogating the B, the female spy, he just starts throwing questions out about her son and her husband. And she, and 2 and 14 are scrambling to find the answers.
Sure.
Whereas in this one, you get an idea that, maybe he can sneak past because he's got the info of these people that are being mentioned. He just doesn't have all the info. He doesn't have the important info.
Yeah, right.
Look, old chap, we've been through many scrapes before, but we've never fallen out over them. The General's not going to behead you.
We won't know until I've reported to the General, will we?
Report to the General? That's a new one.
Another interesting part about that scene, which will become more pertinent in our next episode, is they make mention of the General. And they do it in a way that is abstract but makes more sense once you watch the next episode.
Sure.
So that is really kind of adds to the idea of alternate alternate order of viewing.
Okay.
Whereas these two work together, Schizoid Man and the General work together, their placement as a duo could be up for debate. So as far as that goes, what if you had to? Would you move the placement of this? Do you think? Where do you think this falls?
This is episode
in our alternate timeline we're talking.
Yeah,
about
this
here.
is episode 5, right? That we've watched.
Yes. Yep.
5 out of 17. No, I think it feels appropriate here. I guess I mean a lot of this depends on me knowing sort of what happens next, but I'd imagine if you were going to do something, you'd have to have some kind of turn, which this seems to be getting towards, but I don't know if it's a big enough reveal to have something change. I think I'm pretty happy where this one comes in. You've introduced this general either character or whatever the hell it is that seems to be important, and you could sort of expand off of that. So I think that where this one comes sort of as a 5th episode in our order works for me. It's probably worked the best out of all the shows I've seen so far in terms of placement.
Yeah. I would I would probably put it a little bit later, only because just based on, I don't know, it's tough. Because I feel like the plan or number two's attack on 6 this time feels like something that you would go after later.
Yep.
Like when nothing else has worked. All right. Well, he's very self-assured, and we should attack that directly.
Right.
Nothing else has worked, and also it's tough because I want to say it feels later because of his relationship with the girl. It seems similar to his relationship with the girl in Chimes of Big Ben.
Yep.
He's more comfortable with her, but at the same time, he's still bucking against being referred to as number 6, because when he wakes up as 12 the first day, he says, "I am your number 6." He never says I am. Well, he does say I am number 6 when he's getting into an argument with 12.
Which I think the show doesn't really give enough service to. He's now sort of accepting himself as number 6, which is a weird change. It's a strange argument to have him going from like I'm a person, I'm not a number, to no, never mind, I'm not 12, I'm actually number 6. And the show doesn't really harp on that, which I don't know if that's going to change, but him buying into his number in and of itself is a pretty drastic change for the character.
Right. And I would say that, it seems to be the beginning of some sort of acceptance of
his situation,
where he is and the situation. So, yeah, I mean, it's tough to... this one's kind of tough to place. I guess it depends on how you think it fits into episodes around it, because as I mentioned when we covered A, B, and C, the number 2 from A, B, and C is the number 2 in the general.
Yep.
And depending on how you decide to read it, theoretically A, B, and C should be placed after the general.
Okay.
So whether or not you feel A, B, and C is a later episode or an early episode can really mess with or determine where you think this Schizoid man should go.
Gotcha.
But that's just fun, not really pertinent discussion.
What do you think of the idea?
I think it has fascinating possibilities, but you'll have an awful job convincing me that I am not your number 6.
So how would you rate this plan?
On our scale of 1 to 6, I think this is a 5. This is the most effective plan that I've seen so far. Yeah, I think it's really strong. I think it's interesting as an episode. I think it's interesting as a plot in and of itself, and I think that it's pulled off exceptionally well. And they kind of win at the end in a weird roundabout way. The plot doesn't actually fire. It's more 2. Sorry, I keep calling them 2. 6 screws something up, but it's effective in making number 6 question things, which a lot of the other plots have not done.
Right. This one really, whereas all of the other ones really make him kind of double down on who he is and holding on to that assurance that he knows who he is. Yep. This is the first one that really has, shaken that up, like you say, makes him question the things that he thought were absolutes.
Right.
I would probably put it, I don't know, I would probably say it's a 4.
Okay.
Only because, well, the end game of the plan, right? So like we said last week, there are kind of 3 different types of episodes. There's the ones that are very plot-based episodes that are trying to get information out of number 6. There's the ones that are more metaphorical, and there's the ones that are just sort of like, let's have some fun in the village. This one, I'm not exactly sure what the end game was. Was it just to break him on a personal level?
Well,
or because there's the one scene when 6 comes in and confronts Curtis after 6 has remembers who he is and what happened.
Yep.
Where he takes the "why did you resign" thing and turns that on its head and uses that against Curtis, and because he's saying, "Oh, I have dreams of resign," because apparently, like we said, he only dreams about resigning.
Right. Yeah, he said it's a recurring dream. I mean, I think that's the point, or that's the end goal of this plan, is to break him down to the point where he doesn't know what he is anymore, and maybe legitimately thinks that his resignation is a dream and is willing to share it with people. I think it would be a lot less. I think that Curtis scene where he asked him why he resigned really sort of clarified everything. If you didn't have that scene, this plot would not make as much sense, I don't think. I think it's all a part and parcel of trying to get him to tell them why he resigned, and to just confuse him to the point where he's willing to part with that information.
Yeah. Well, I guess if you're looking at it as a more general breakdown, then I'd say it's probably around a 5. But if you're just going based on, is this plan specifically to find out why he resigned? I feel like it's a long way around to try and get to that point. Yes. Going the other route. Yep. But yeah, but it's definitely one of the stronger. I guess my it's just such an out there plan, and there are so many variables to be considered.
Yeah, well, it seems better in the moment than it does when you think about it. It's that kind of thing. It's like there's a lot of he's not a clone. They just happen to get a guy who looks exactly like him, who's also a super spy, who's capable of executing this. There's the clairvoyance angle. There's a lot of things that they had to just sort of shove into this, and you just go, well, it makes sense in context, but it's quite an epic plan when you sit down and think about what actually went into this. But in terms of the show, it makes sense. But
yes, and I think my one big thing with this show in general is things making sense in the context of the show versus I think what you're saying and what you have been saying is appropriate, where this episode specifically, if you really get into it and start nitpicking it, then it does kind of fall apart, but I don't think that's the point. Right. And especially with the ones that get a little more metaphorical, like we talked about last week, what happens inside the body of that specific episode is all that matters.
Right, yeah.
Which is another reason why I have issues with people caring about the order. Because, I mean, you could mess around with the order if you want, but for the most part, these episodes are self-contained.
Yes, yeah.
And as long as that holds true, I think you're good. I think they work well. Let's see. Anything else to talk about? We touched on number 2. I think this plan suits this number 2 because it's so overly confident of a plan.
Yep.
And his number 2 is very, very preppy and very overly confident. And one thing I was going to mention: did you get a Total Recall vibe out of this?
Not as much as the last episode. Why? What part kicked that off? Well,
I was specifically thinking about towards the end of Total Recall, where they have the sequence at the end where Arnold finds out that he is buddies with Cohagen.
Yes, and
then he shows the video. Yeah, and he shows the video of Cohagen and himself being buddy, and then like the whole relationship between 2 and quote unquote number 12 had that sort of vibe going on.
Yeah, no, I guess I can appreciate that. That's a great scene in Total Recall. We're going to get Cohagen and fuck him good.
All of Total Recall is a great scene of Total Recall.
They erased her identity and implanted a new one.
If I'm not me, who the hell am I?
But I could see that being the point you could make at the end. But that is true, where the agent has come home to roost, and the personality of our number 6 is left out in the lurch by it.
But yeah, I think that number two's personality in this works really well in this situation for that reason.
Yep.
Because he comes across like number 12 as an old like frat buddy of his or something, you know?
Yeah, right.
And their relationship is very old boy, college chum kind of back and forth, which is nice. And definitely he's definitely a different. He's very subtle. I guess, I'd say he's pretty subtle.
But number two?
But he doesn't... but he still makes a mark, he still seems like he stands out. As opposed to the fake, or the first number two in the last episode, which was basically just sort of going through the motions.
I'd agree with that. I thought it was a good performance by this guy. It was... It was as you're saying, it's the right tone for this plot to actually come together.
And his name was Anton Rogers. I actually forgot to give the writer and director. The writer was Terrence Feely, and the director of this one was Pat Jackson, who has directed up to this point at least one. I think he's done one other one at this point. I think he does a couple more. But other trivia for this episode. Only time Rover is referred to as Rover. This is the only time, unfortunately, that we will see a black character on the Prisoner.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yep.
What about a Sheik or whatever the?
I doubt it.
I didn't notice.
Yeah, I mean, that's the one thing that the remake actually does really well is. There are people from all over the world in the remake. Yep. I don't know why. Well, I do know why, because it was British television in the 60s. Yeah. But yeah, it's.
Wasn't the girl who drove him around in the pilot Asian? She was.
Yep. But yeah, there's not as many other nationalities showing up in this village that's supposed to be a. International place.
Yes, yeah. They're all very British or Haitian.
Yeah. And the only other piece of trivia actually pertains to what you said last week. The episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation titled "The Schizoid Man" was planned to have Patrick McGoohan as a guest star.
Oh, really?
Yes, he playing Dr. something. I forget the character's name.
Nealon or something, I think. Something like that.
And even though he didn't, and the episode had to be heavily rewritten, the title was kept as a tribute to McGoohan.
Huh. Well, that'll be something to ponder when I get to that. That's the second season, I think, of Star Trek: Next Generation. So.
Well, we'll just have to... if we get to that point on the Star Trek podcast, we'll have to just... imagine McGoohan saying all of those lines.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't. I was just looking at a little bit of information. I don't remember really the Simpsons episode where this is.
Yes. That's a great one. It, yeah. Well, yeah, it's half of it is a Prisoner reference, and the other half of it is it's known as the episode where Homer gets on the internet and becomes Mr. X, giving you all the muck that's fit to rake.
Yep.
And he uncovers the crap. I forget what the ridiculous plot is that he uncovers by accident. Right. And so they send him to the island,
which is
meets
the village or whatever. Yeah.
Right, where he meets number 6, voiced by Patrick McGoohan. And unfortunately, I haven't seen the movie. Shit, it's a Disney cartoon, something Atlantis.
Oh, okay.
That he does a voice for that. I haven't seen it. I'm sure it's great, but I kind of wish he hadn't done it, because if he hadn't, then his last acting credit would have been on The Simpsons, which is great.
That's funny.
But that's just me as a Simpsons fanboy.
Yeah. Well, interesting.
Yeah. But that's about it for the Schizoid Man. Do you have anything you'd like to plug?
Sure. You can go to Star Trek podcast we're doing. Clay joins me occasionally, and I'm going through all the episodes of Star Trek Next Generation. You can go to thepenskypodcast.com for that, and it's on iTunes and all that junk. So, yeah, much appreciated if people wanted to check that out.
Awesome. And again, I am no means I am by no means an expert on this show. So if you have anything you'd like to correct me on or yell at me about, you can email me at theprisonerpodcast@gmail.com, or you can stalk me on Twitter @prisonerpodcast. And we're also on Facebook. And if you'd like to leave a comment, you can do so at our homepage, backinthevillage.com, where we have all our episodes and some show notes and all that kind of fun stuff that you might not get if you find this episode or any episodes through some other means.
Absolutely.
So check that out, and then next time we will be back with The General.
Good.
All right, thanks, guys.
See ya.
Well, there you go. That's Schizoid Man. I guess with all that Total Recall talk, it's appropriate we were out for the past 2 weeks. But next week, we will be back with The General, and I hope you will too. All right, thanks. Bye.